Good afternoon, this is Gina Briscoe. In this recording we're going to focus on strategic reading. So let's get ready. Let's get our supplies together. Listed here are some supplies you can get, such as a highlighter, your notes from class, your notes that you've printed out, colored pens and pencils, and so forth. You want to find yourself a quiet environment, preferably at a table where you can write, a hard chair, a hard uncomfortable chair, lots of light because we don't want you to get sleepy. You need to take frequent breaks as you are reading, and we're going to talk about reading with a purpose, and our strategy is going to help us focus on purpose reading. The overall purpose of reading is just to understand, and we're going to use a system called the Parrott system as we begin to learn how to read textbooks, read articles, read cases, and so forth. So this is the system, and these are the steps that we're going to utilize, and we're going to go through each one of these steps in detail in this recording. We're going to preview the chapters, preview the book, whatever. We're going to ask questions and activate our prior learning, prior information as well. We're going to read the chapters. We're going to recite, recall, and review. We're going to organize our notes, organize our information, and then we're going to test ourselves on what we've read. So the first step is previewing. Previewing is looking over the entire reading assignment, and in nursing particularly we give just huge reading assignments, and it can be quite overwhelming. And so a good thing to do is to preview to start with and decide how you're going to cover all the reading. You want to familiarize yourself with the concepts that you're going to be covering, so looking at your objectives and your content is good, and then also looking at the length of the reading. Now, as we're previewing, we want to think about skimming or surveying, and skimming and surveying are two different things. When we skim, we read rapidly and superficially, and we just look at the chapter elements to determine the main ideas, the main elements, and the organizational layout. Versus surveying is when we have a question and we're going back to read the material to find out the answer to it. So surveying and skimming are two different things, and you're going to do both as you're reading. And I will use the analogy of a map when trying to differentiate between skimming and surveying. It's kind of like looking at a map. You're getting ready to buy some books, and you buy you a map at the store, and you open that map up and you look at it and you see the whole state of Alabama, and then you look a little closer and you see the city of Decatur or Huntsville, and you kind of see how they're laid out there. That's kind of like skimming, okay? Versus you're getting ready to go somewhere. You pull that map back out and you figure out where you're at on the map, and then you figure out where you're going to go, and then you actually investigate and figure out what your trip is going to be like and which route you're going to take. So that's surveying. So we do skimming and surveying when we're preparing to read, and as we go back to information. So we want to skim our chapters, our books. We want to look at how the book is laid out. We want to look at what resources we have in the book. Oftentimes your books have a chapter overview and a summary at the beginning and at the end. Sometimes your book also has questions at the end. You'll see case studies in your book, and you'll see the major headings, and you'll see how they're organized. Lots of books use different colors for different areas in the book, and they're usually consistent. You may see charts and figures, and so you want to look at all those things in your book and figure out what you have at your disposal to use as you're reading. You also want to note if your book has bolded or italicized words. Oftentimes your terms are bolded, and so then some books have the terms actually defined somewhere in the book as well. Another big thing about previewing is breaking up your topics. So when you're getting ready to preview, and say you've previewed your chapter and you've skimmed over, now you're ready to learn about a topic, then you want to just pick that one topic and read it. A lot of the books are formatted in such a way that they give you some foundations at the beginning, such as anatomy and physiology and stuff like that. And so if you're really on top of your anatomy and physiology, you could just skip over that. If you're not, then you're going to want to read that before you get started. But breaking it up by topic and only reading about one topic at a time is a good strategy. The second step in the PARROT system is activating prior knowledge and asking questions. So I want you to first ask, what do I already know about this topic? What else? Where else have I studied it? Perhaps I know a little bit about the anatomy and physiology, and I'd like to skip over that section describing the normal anatomy and physiology. Or perhaps I don't, and I know that I need to read that. What have I already learned about this topic? Perhaps I've learned about assessing the respiratory system, and I know that really well, or maybe I don't. Perhaps I've learned some other things I can bring to this information in my mind. I also want to ask, have I had any personal experience with this topic? Maybe I've had this condition. Maybe I have a family member that's had it. So thinking about that and remembering that, activating your knowledge as far as your experiences with the topic. Making those associations and connections are key in deep processing. And then maybe I don't know anybody and have had no experience and I know nothing much about the topic. Then perhaps, going online and Googling the term and looking for news articles, looking for celebrities that have had the condition. That's something I do a lot of times when I'm preparing for a lecture, is I try to look up and see if there's any celebrities that have had this condition, because I think it's interesting and it helps us to remember. And studies show it does help us to remember things as we're studying them. So what do I already know about the topic, and what do I need to learn? So you need to ask yourself, what do you need to learn? This creates a purpose. And if you don't know what you need to learn and you're at a loss, then I would pull out the problem pieces form, and it lists all these questions, all these different categories, and see, do I know the answer to all those? Well, if I do, maybe I don't even need to read the article or the book or whatever. But if I don't, then I'm creating a purpose. I'm trying to determine what I need to learn. Determine how many pages you want to cover within no longer than a 45-minute period, and flag your text. Put your little sticky as to how far you want to go. That way you've got a goal. And then go ahead and determine the parts of the material you already know and want to skim versus what you want to read word for word. Your second R in the PARROT system stands for read and recite. So as you're reading, you don't want to highlight or take notes with your first reading, because you will have the tendency of trying to over-highlight and over-take notes. You can't read something and know what's important until you've read it in its entirety, and then you've got to go back and determine what's important. And once you've read it, you want to try to recite it. Now, I'm not saying word for word, but you want to recite it in your own words. And you're going to do that out loud, preferably. So check your comprehension by saying whatever you've read out loud in a summary format in your own words. You want to then continue to make those personal connections. You know, think about how that content relates to prior learning, personal experiences, and then the world and things that are easily retrievable in your mind. You want to try to visualize your reading if you're a visual person. If you're reading about a condition, you know, picture what that patient would look like in your mind. You want to, again, explain it out loud to yourself if you're where you can. And you want to note how the material is organized. Do they provide for you the assessment information first, and then the labs, and then, you know, a lot of times the nursing format for the textbooks is laid out in the nursing process step by step. You want to monitor your own comprehension as you read and recite it. You want to sift and sort the essential information as you're paraphrasing it. You want to note the details that you don't know. You want to recognize when you're confused, when you see a term you don't know. You want to, and some people prefer to stop and look the term up if the book doesn't provide it. Part of the R as well is recite, recall, and review. So as you're trying to recite, you know, recall the key words and the key concepts. If you cannot remember, then go back and review your sections again, or survey the text to correct your understanding. Again, you want to recall prior lessons and connections to the material. If you need to go back and look at your foundational material again, such as going back and looking at an assessment of the respiratory system, make a note in your in your book, on a piece of paper, whatever. You know, if you're not going to stop and do it right then, that you'll do it later. And at this point, you're going to start highlighting, underlining, and writing notes in your textbook margins as you reread the material that you do not know or feel like you need to know better. And so at this point, you can begin to highlight. I'll just say a couple of words about highlighting. Develop your own system for highlighting. You know, if your yellow means one thing, then use it consistently as yellow means this. Yellow means it's a key word. Pink means I need to look this term up. You know, be consistent and create your own system. Write questions in the margin. Turn your turn your chapter headings into questions. I think I've got that a little bit later, but use your own system. The next letter in Parrot is O, and O is for organize. And so organizing is very, very important. Organize your material from reading in a format that works for you. Every person's different. I know we've talked a lot about organizing in this class already, but you know, whatever works for you. If you need to add your notes from reading to your lecture notes, then that's a good system, I think. Or if you want to actually have a Cornell note page laying out and use that system as your reading, that's a good format. And then the KWL system, which I think I have a form in your handouts on how to use that. Some students prefer to when they're going back and surveying, they'd like to go back and survey and create these graphic visuals and tables, graphic organizing, to help them study. And so organizing your material is deep processing. And concept maps are also an example of how to organize the material. The big thing is, don't overtake your notes. Don't take notes on what you already know, because you're just wasting your time if that's what you're doing. And be sure and don't skip the summarizing step in anything you do. If you can summarize what you've read in a few words, and it takes a lot of practice to do that, then that will be beneficial in your reading and note-taking. Hopefully I'll have something in the future to assist with summarizing, and I may have a handout in your handouts at some point on that. And then the last test in the Parrott system is testing. You don't know what you don't know unless you test yourself. And so if you're wrong when you start going back and trying to test yourself, then you need to go back and reread and survey for answers, recite and recall as well. Some sources for testing and some ways to test yourself: create questions from the headings in the chapters, utilize the problem pieces form, take your objectives and answer them. Make your objectives a question and answer them. Scan your text for bold and italicized words. Can you define them and use them in a sentence? Use your study guide resources that come with your books. Use the end of chapter quizzes. Use NCLEX review books and look up whatever topic you're studying and do some of those practice questions. Use your evolved case studies that correspond with your topic. Invent scenarios with friends and then apply the information to the scenario. Ask, what if I had a patient with pneumonia that I found in the floor? Just ask those crazy things and start thinking about all the possibilities with a patient. There's some other things you can do if you are actually reading case studies, and I'm going to model these in class, so I'm not going to go over them per se because they won't mean much without the example. But these are some key things as you're looking at cases that you can do while you're reading. And like I said, I'm going to model this in class for you. And then there's some other tips. Some students have recommended some of these tips, and so I wanted to share them with you. Consider taking the quizzes or doing the case studies, or doing some of those testing things first, and then only read and review the material that you don't know. And that's for the student that's very sure of themselves. Go back and reread each day after class any unclear areas. Use some of the other resources to review the material rather than just your textbook. Go to the Nursing Reference Center in the Calhoun Library and pull up the quick lessons on the topics that you're studying, because that's a really concise, most important kind of things by topic. That's an excellent resource. Use online sites that are well established, I will say. Vary your highlighting with a method. And so, again, like I said earlier, differentiate your colors based on, whatever. Importance, what you don't completely understand, what the teacher emphasizes in the class. Some students like to highlight by body system. They may use blue for the respiratory and red or pink for the cardiac. Whatever works for you. But the key is being an active reader, engaging in some sort of deep thinking and activity, and I think using a format like Parrott so that you are doing some deep processing will make all the difference as you're reading your textbook, reading articles, and so forth. This concludes the recording. We're going to do some reading in class, and so I would like for you to bring your textbooks with you to class so that we can look at them and we can do some reading. Thank you very much.